Okay, so it's been a few days since we put the Marvel Mystery Oil into the engine. I've come back down to the boat. It's a little bit late in the evening, so we're doing it using different spotlights. So here's the test. We have socket and breaker bar, 2-foot breaker bar. I'm going to put this onto the crank now and see if that engine has freed up at all. Hopefully it's made a bit of a difference, but sometimes you never know. So here we go. Let's see what we can get. Maybe 2mm, if that. Now that's not a great sign because it means it's pretty locked up, but it's a good sign because it's not locked up solid. There is movement in there. So it could be that it's just adjusting the push rods and there's a bit of slack in the engine, or it could be that there is a tiny bit of movement in those pistons. So I'm going to keep working this for a little while and see if it makes any difference. Hopefully it will. I suspect I'm going to be here for a little bit longer. So let's see how I get on. Well, the engine is definitely locked up there nice and tight, so it's moving a little bit further than it did last time, but what I'm going to do, just while I move this using the breaker bar, I'm going to put in a tiny bit more of the Marvel Mystery Oil into the 4 cylinders that I can get to, in the hope that just a tiny bit more lubrication in there may help. Okay, so we managed to get the valve cover off, and as you can see, they don't look too bad. Bit of something going on down here, so we'll have a look. It could be oil. Can't see any water sitting in there, which is good. So the next step is to release the rocker arms, and what I want to do then is be able to push down on the individual valves themselves, and if they move down, up and down okay, then we know the valves aren't sealed. It's just the piston rings that are sealed. Again, having this like this gives us the ability, once we push that down, we can get more fluid into these cylinders as well. Not too worried about this side of the engine because we've got access to it and we've got a lot of fluid in. It's what's underneath there and the fact that there's so limited space to get anything in there to change either the risers or remove the exhaust header. So it's going to be tricky, but I think what I'm going to do is go from this side across the engine and just gradually strip everything out. Eventually we'll take out the plenum, the inlet cover there, I can't remember what it's called. We'll take that off, we'll take the carburetor off, take the distributor out, and see if we can get a bit of a view as to what's happening, where these push rods go into the engine, check to make sure any of those aren't sort of bent or anything like that might be preventing it from turning. So still a lot to do, lots to get on with. So the next step for me, taking off these rocker arms, just by undoing the nut, removing those, and then we should be able to use the mallet to just tap those valves down to make sure that they're moving freely. Okay, so dilemma gets even worse. Just managed to pull out the first push rod, just have a quick look at it, and it's actually bent. That means that the engine was turning and something locked up and caused the rods to bend. So we need to actually take the whole, both cylinder heads off, take the input manifold off, let's see what's going on underneath, pull out all the rods. We're going to have to replace the rods and potentially a bunch of other stuff in there. So not going to be quite as easy as I thought it would be, but at least we know what we're dealing with. There's no point trying to release the engine now, we've just got to take it all apart. This is what it looks like, and you can see there that's seriously bent, and that's the first of the push rods on the side that I can get to. So at least we know what we're dealing with. Let's crack on now and start stripping the engine down.
fall so hard. I just need to escape for a moment, somewhere. I've been hearing voices that guide me to my choices, but I never do what I want.
Okay, so it's about 2 o'clock in the morning and I've been working on the engine for the last few hours. Managed to get quite a lot of headway, so I've managed to take off the inlet manifold. Let me just turn the camera. So there's the inlet manifold, unbolted all the bolts, took the carburetor off. You can see the bolts there, and this is what the engine looks like underneath. So inside the V of the V8 you can see the push rods coming down here onto the tappet guides. Apologies for the lighting, it's not very good. So yeah, push rods coming down. We have got some fairly significant damage. So this one, for example, he's not attached to anything, so something's going on there. That rocker's come completely off. So there is a fair bit of damage inside this engine that we're going to have to attend to. I've been taking off some of the ones on this side. We already had one bent push rod here. This one you can tell is actually significantly bent as well. So it's going to be really interesting to see once we get this head off and then the other side off, to see whether or not we've got some bigger damage. I'm hoping it's just the top end. We can replace some of the valves, get those rebedded, maybe get the cylinder heads reseated, and then replace the push rods and the tappets. So interesting to see what's going on. My plan is for this trip is to remove the two heads so that we're left with the V. We should be able to see inside the individual cylinders on both sides of the engine, and then that should be, without the push rods and things in there at the moment, we should be able to turn that by hand, because the crank, you can see in the bottom there, you've got the camshaft along the center that operates the push rods. I'm hoping that without the two heads on there and whatever's blocking it, that we should be able to turn the engine by hand. That way all we have to do is rebuild the top end of the engine. First head is off. This is what it looks like. Okay, now importantly, we'll see better in daylight tomorrow, but this is what it looks like in each of the cylinders. So that one's not too bad. You can see the fluid we put in there, but as we progress along, these are not looking nice. And that one, you Got a bit of work to do on those cylinders. Well, good morning. So after a very late night last night, managed to get quite a lot stripped off the engine. We're down one half already, got one head off. Cylinders don't look too hot. In daylight they look even worse. I've got oil on my head. It's a very cramped place to be working. So what I'm working on today is trying to get the other side of the engine stripped down so that we can see the cylinders on the far side up against the side of the boat. Very cramped working conditions, very difficult to get any spanners and sockets into the space. I am struggling a little bit, but we'll see how we get on today. Okay, so this is what it looks like this morning. We did try to show some of this last night, and as you can see in daylight it's a little bit better. Those cylinders don't look too hot. There's a lot of carbon on them. This far one here has large chunks of carbon. You can actually see some fairly heavy impact marks as well where the valves have hit into the piston. We're going to need to check and make sure that piston's okay and not been punctured. Looking at the other valves, the other cylinders, most of the cylinder walls are a little bit gritty, but not too bad. This one has some fairly considerable bubbling rust on there. I think that one might need quite a lot of cleaning. I don't think they're beyond repair. I think we can do something fairly good with this actually. These are really solid engines, cast iron engines, based on the Chevy 454 truck engine, 7 litre. So this is what I'm working on at the moment, trying to get the electrics to come off. They're attached to a bracket. We saw that on the side we've already taken off. And then I need to get in behind, and you can just see the pipe at the back there. That's where the exhaust riser comes up. I need to split off the rubber tube off the back there. This is where the exhaust and water goes back out the side of the boat. The last one was fairly rusty inside here. This one looks to be fairly similar, so it's going to be quite tricky getting that solid pipe off. And then I need to get in behind, and as you can see there's very little space there between the beige colour of the boat side and the actual engine itself. Got to get in underneath and try and get those bolts undone for the exhaust manifold. Once that's done, I can remove the exhaust manifold, although they are extremely heavy, so how I'm going to get it out through that small gap over the top of the engine and then back out through the hatch is going to be quite tricky. And then it's a case of taking the valve cover off this one, releasing the rockers and removing the push rods, and then taking the head off on that side. Once that's done, we can take everything back to the shop, we can give it a good clean, we can do some pressure testing on the risers, make sure that the exhaust manifolds of the risers are holding and not leaking. And then it'll be a case of getting the parts we need to rebuild the engine. You can see there the depth of the push rod bend, it's quite substantial, so some damage has happened to this top end. I'm just really hoping that once we have the other head off and the push rods out, we should be able to circulate the engine on the crank. We'll see the camshaft moving along the center there, and we should see the pistons moving up and down. But I'm not going to do any of that until we've had a chance to clean those cylinder bores up a little bit, get rid of some of that surface rust. So I've just removed the rocker cover, and as you can see we've got some pretty significant damage going on. So this push rod here has completely passed the rocker, and I believe that's the one that's seriously bent. It is. There we go. So yeah, looks like it wasn't properly seated onto the rocker arm, which would have meant that it would come off as it was pushing through, and that would have bent the rod and that really is quite a considerable bend, so that one's junk. And what's disappointing is that it doesn't look like there's very much damage to the actual rocker arm itself, so it probably was just that this wasn't either tightened down properly or wasn't seated properly. These things have a little little groove underneath at the end of the push rod puts into. If that's not seated properly, when this engine was started up, that would have vibrated to the side and then boom, popped off sideways. Game over, and that's enough to have locked up the engine. So, stupid mistake. Would have taken 3 seconds to check before the engine was put back together, and it's buggered it.